Hello, I'm Mrs. Nelson. Welcome to our lesson on informational text. Today we're going to be reading about an astronaut who broke the record for the longest time spent in space, and then we're going to be writing about it. So before we start, I want you to put a rocket ship emoji in the chat if you know what an astronaut is. Or I want you to type something that you know about space. So go ahead and do that now. Either tell me something you know about space or put a rocket ship emoji in the chat. Wow, those are great ideas and great answers. I'm excited to learn about this with you today. Okay, so here's what we will be learning today. These are our learning goals. I'm going to read them out loud, and I want you to follow along with me as I read. We will ask and answer questions about an informational text. Now, the informational text that we're using today is a nonfiction article. Who can remind me what nonfiction means? That's right. Nonfiction means it's something that's real and true and something that happened to somebody in real life. So today we're going to be reading a real life story about an astronaut's experience in space and what their adventure was like. Our second learning goal is we will use what we read to write a letter to an astronaut. So after we do our reading, we're going to take our time and write a letter using the letter writing skills that we learned about last week to write a letter asking some questions and telling some information to the astronaut that we read about, Frank Rubio. So before we start, I want to go over our standards too. We're going to ask and answer questions about the text, and we're going to read nonfiction independently. Okay, so now we are going to use this chart, and it looks a little funny, but it's something that we're going to use to organize our thoughts and our information as we're reading. So it's called a KWL chart, and the K stands for what I know. So what do I already know about space? Or what do I already know about astronauts? So I know something that I already know is astronauts float in space. So I'm going to put that under the what I know section of my chart. Okay? For the W part of the chart, it's what I want to know. It's any questions that I have about what we're going to read and questions that I can think about ahead of time and look for when I'm doing my reading. So, two questions that I have are what do they eat and how do they sleep? How do they sleep in space? So, what you're going to do now is I want you to take some time and fill in our KWL chart with some questions about what you know and what you want to know about space. So in a live class, I would have the students fill this in a shared doc or an interactive slide. I would also give some accommodations for these. Any students who are below proficiency would get sentence starters and icons. And the students who have reading comprehension IEPs would probably also get a more simplified chart, maybe some choices that they could fill in the blank. So, okay, class, now that you've finished your KWL chart, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to be reading. Here we go. A year in space. So as you're reading, I want you to think about the parts that are interesting to you. I want you to think about things that you might have a question about. So as you're reading, you're like, I wonder about that. And I want you to think about something that you learned while you were reading. And those things that we've learned while we're reading, we're going to put on that last part of the chart, the what I learned. So as we're reading, as we learn something, we're going to fill it in, what I learned. And if you find any of the answers to your questions, I want you to put them underneath the question in the what I want to know section. So we're going to look for facts to answer our questions we wrote in the W, and we're going to write down what we learned as we read the story under the last section in the chart. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit of the story to you and talk about it, and then I'm going to give you time to read it on your own. So astronaut Frank Rubio accidentally spent a record-breaking length of time in space. He wants to go back. On September 27, 2023, Frank Rubio broke the record for the longest U.S. spaceflight. When he got back, he ate a salad. What most of us crave when we get back is fresh food, he told Time. That's what he wanted when he was at the International Space Station. Rubio's record-breaking mission wasn't planned. It was supposed to be 180 days, but it lasted 371. Coolant leaking on the spacecraft that was supposed to bring him home delayed his return. Nearly 4 months after coming back to Earth, Rubio talks about his time in space. So we're going to be reading about what he talks about his time in space. So Frank Rubio lived on the International Space Station for over a whole year. To me, that's a really interesting fact. So I want you to think about what is something that you learned already from what I've read. And if you've learned something already, I want you to put it in that what you learned column on your chart. All right, so now I'm going to give you time to finish reading the article independently. When you click on the link for the article, you can either read the article or at the top, there's a read aloud button where you can click play and the story can be read to you, or you can follow along as the story is read to you. So either way, I want you to finish the story and I want you to keep adding to your KWL chart. When you're finished, I want you to take your morning break and we will come back at our normal slot for our next class time. Okay, so this is some supports that I would put into place for students with IEPs or below grade level readers is to encourage them to use the read aloud. And also they could use text-to-speech tools to help fill in their charts. Time for Kids already provides a read aloud, so this would be available for all the students to use. And I think it's a beneficial tool for them to be reading and listening at the same time. So we're going to be coming back. So as we're coming back from our break, I want to ask you, what surprised you while we were reading? I know something that surprised me was that he said, but you're able to call Earth anytime you want. And at least once or twice per week, you can video conference. I am surprised that they are able to call Earth so often with them being in space. So type in the chat, what is one thing that you learned when reading this article? So right now I would take time to let students either verbally answer or type in the chat some things that they learned and have a discussion about some things that they'd already learned when reading the article. So as we are transitioning to the next part of our lesson, I want you to look and make sure you completed you turned in your completed KWL chart. I'm going to be checking them while you're working on the next part of our assignment to make sure that you did them correctly. And if I see some things like some confusion, I'm going to have us work together later today in a breakout room to kind of clear up any of that confusion. So I want you to make sure you turned it in so that I have a chance to look at it. Okay, so now we're going to be writing a letter to Frank Rubio. We want to make sure we include our greeting that we talked about. We want to say, Dear Frank Rubio, you're going to be using 2 facts from the article, especially the ones that surprised you. I want you to use that what I learned section of the KWL chart that you already found. So you already found the information that you're going to use for your letter. I want you to use what surprised you that you wrote on your KWL chart. So you're going to write some facts in that section. For the next part, you're going to put 2 or more questions that you have for Frank. These may be questions that you wrote in the what I want to know and you didn't get an answer to, or something that you were curious about while you were reading that you want to ask. After that, you're going to do your closing, sincerely, and your signature, which is your name. I want you to use some of these sentence starters if you need help. And I'm going to show you an example of what I wrote. So here's my sample letter. Dear Frank Rubio, I learned that you lived in space for over 300 days. I also read that you exercised every day to stay strong. What did you eat while in space? Did you miss your family? Sincerely, Mrs. Nelson. So now what you are going to do is you are going to write your own sentence. You are going to make sure to include your greeting, your 2 facts from the article, especially ones that surprised you. Remember to use your KWL chart. I want you to use 2 or more questions that you have for Frank while you were reading. And those can also be from your KWL chart as well, plus your closing and your signature. Use these to help you while you're writing. You can say, I learned that, just like mine had. I learned that you lived in space. I read that. What did you do? Did you? All right. And make sure you use these for your time for your writing. If you finish with time left, you can make an illustration of life in space to go with your letter. And you can also do a PS section to extend your thinking. So I would give students time to work on their letter and um, give them as much time as they needed, maybe the rest of the class period to work on them. So I would end the class with great job, readers and writers. You did a great job researching. Um, and I want to talk about some things that we want to share that you wrote in your letter. So what are some interesting facts that you shared with him or some questions that you had for him? And I would give the students time to reply. They can reply verbally or in the chat. I'm going to make sure everyone's engaging and giving me some feedback so that I know that what they pulled from the articles. All right, class, today we learned a nonfiction text about space. We read about a nonfiction text about space. We read about Frank Rubio and the year he spent in space, and we wrote letters to him. And today you read an informational article. You organized your ideas on KWL chart. You wrote a letter using evidence from the text. You are great researchers and writers. Thank you. Have a great day, and I'll see you later. All right, so I talked about some of the things where I did differentiation within the lesson. I felt like it made sense to kind of talk about it as it happened, but I also wanted to answer the question of other ways that I could differentiate. So one of the ways is through visual supports. I used anchor charts to show like what a friendly letter format was, and I use sentence starters and not only for everyone to use based on the chart that I put at the end of the lesson, but I also provided them for students who needed extra support based on IEPs or low performance. For auditory supports, all reading materials were read aloud or they were read by audio recordings. And a lot of the instructions I gave verbally and visually so that they could be processed in both ways by students. For engagement and kinesthetics, I used emojis for responses in the chat box. I wanted to make sure that students had an independent way of being involved by typing, by drawing, by using voice-to-text inputs, by interacting with the lesson throughout. For IEP-aligned accommodations, for those who had reading comprehension struggles, text-to-speech and voice-to-text tools were activated. They were allowed to be used. Some other ones were scaffolding sentence-by-sentence writing support. So if I noticed that they were really struggling, I could pull them into a breakout room or pull them aside at the end of the lesson and do some more writing support. Extra time was allowed for a lot of the students with test modifications. And because it was such a large group of the students, this is something that I provided for all the students, but then gave enrichment opportunities for those who were early finishers. So gave time to those who needed extra help, as well as gave extra enrichment and extra time to build on for those who were early finishers. And then I tried to make sure that I gave opportunities for feedback, like we could do breakout rooms, we could do live feedback on the chat, we could have discussion and give feedback in real time. And then, so these are strategies that I used that ensured that all students had equal access to the content and that they could show their understanding both in a way that was developmental and in a way that it was individually appropriate for each of them. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for allowing me to interview for this position.